The void between stars held secrets that humanity was never meant to discover. At least, that's what the ancient races believed. They had carved up the galaxy into territories, established laws older than human civilization, and grown comfortable in their superiority. Then one day, a battered human vessel tumbled through a spatial anomaly and everything changed. Captain James Harlow didn't look like someone who would defy an empire. He was a weathered man in his 50s with tired eyes and calloused hands. He had spent 20 years hauling cargo between Earth's colonies, dreaming of retirement on Mars with his daughter. The freighter Wandering Star wasn't built for glory. It was a working ship, scarred by meteor impacts and jury-rigged repairs. Its crew of 43 were ordinary people. Engineers, botanists, medical staff, families seeking new opportunities on the frontier colonies. None of them had signed up for war. When the anomaly swallowed them, reality twisted like paper in fire. Colors that had no names burned across the viewport. Time felt thick and wrong. Then silence. Cold, absolute silence. Navigator Beth Park was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "Captain, the stars are gone. All of them." She wasn't exaggerating. Outside the ship, space looked empty. No familiar constellations. No distant galaxies. Just darkness and a single massive structure in the distance. It looked like a city suspended in nothing. Towers of crystalline material spiraled upward for hundreds of kilometers, glowing with internal light. Platforms the size of continents drifted in orbital patterns. Strange vessels moved between them like schools of metallic fish. Chief Engineer David Ortega whistled low. "That's not natural. Someone built that. Someone with technology we can't even imagine." Before anyone could respond, the Wandering Star shuddered. Magnetic clamps locked onto the hull from invisible sources. The ship's systems went haywire. Communications flooded with harsh, clicking sounds that the computer struggled to translate. Medical Officer Linda Torres gripped her console. "Captain, we're being pulled toward that structure. I can't stop it." Harlow's mind raced. They were outmatched, outgunned, and completely alone. But he had survived pirate raids, corporate sabotage, and a near-fatal collision with an asteroid. Survival meant staying calm. "Everyone, secure stations. Torres, get me any translation our computer can manage. Park, keep recording everything. If we don't make it out, someone needs to know what happened here." The translation came through broken and distorted. Primitive vessel detected. Origin unknown. Scanning for contamination. Biological signatures detected. Carbon-based lifeforms. Alert. Alert. Unregistered species in Dominion space. Quarantine protocols engaged. The voice was cold, mechanical, devoid of anything resembling compassion. Within minutes, armored figures materialized inside the ship. They didn't use doors or airlocks. They simply appeared in bursts of light. Each stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in segmented armor that shifted colors like oil on water. Their faces were hidden behind smooth, featureless masks. They moved with predatory grace, weapons drawn. Energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power. The crew froze. Several people screamed. A young botanist named Robert Chen tried to run and was stopped instantly by a paralyzing beam of blue light. He dropped to the floor, conscious but unable to move. One of the armored figures spoke, and this time the translation was clearer. "You are trespassers in Dominion territory. By ancient law, unauthorized entry is punishable by immediate termination. You have no rights. You have no appeal. Prepare for judgment." Harlow stepped forward, hands raised in peace. "We mean no harm. We're lost. Our ship malfunctioned and brought us here by accident. We're just trying to get home." The armored figure tilted its head, studying him like an insect. Ignorance is not innocence. The Dominion has ruled this sector for 18,000 cycles. Every species knows our boundaries. Your presence here is either invasion or espionage. Both carry the same sentence. Around the ship, more vessels were arriving. Sleek warships that dwarfed the wandering star. Each one bristled with weapons that could vaporize planets. On the view screen, Harlow could see hundreds of them forming a perimeter. This wasn't just first contact. This was an execution waiting to happen. But something in Harlow refused to accept that. He had faced down corporate assassins who wanted him dead for refusing to transport illegal weapons. He had stared at the cold vacuum of space through a cracked helmet and survived. He wasn't going to let his crew die without a fight, even if that fight was just words. "Then judge me," he said, voice steady. "I'm the captain. This is my ship. My responsibility. But these people are innocent. They're farmers, doctors, teachers. Let them go." The armored figure was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke, and there was something different in its tone. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just surprise. "You offer yourself in exchange for your subordinates. This is not typical behavior for primitive species. Usually, leaders flee while followers perish." Harlow met the creature's hidden gaze. "We're human. We don't abandon our people." The words hung in the recycled air of the ship. Outside, the alien armada waited. Inside, 43 humans held their breath. And somewhere in the vast machinery of the Dominion, ancient protocols began processing an anomaly they had never encountered before. A species that refused to follow the rules. A captain who wouldn't surrender. A crew that stood together against impossible odds. The armored figures conferred in their clicking language. Harlow could see Park still recording everything. Ortega had his hand near the emergency systems, ready to act if needed. Torres was checking vital signs of the paralyzed botanist. They were scared, but they were functioning. That was what mattered. Keep functioning. Keep fighting. Keep hoping. Finally, the lead figure spoke again. "You will be brought before the High Arbiter. The Dominion will decide your fate. If you resist, you die. If you cooperate, you may live long enough to regret this encounter. Choose now." Harlow looked back at his crew. 43 faces looked back at him. Some young, some old. All human. All depending on him to get them home. He turned back to the alien. "We'll cooperate. But know this. Humanity doesn't forget its people. If we don't return, others will come looking. And they'll want answers." It was a bluff. Earth had no idea where they were. But the alien didn't need to know that. The figure made a sound that might have been laughter. Bold words from a species that barely knows its own star system. "Very well, human. Let us see if your courage lasts beyond this moment." The wandering star was pulled deeper into the alien structure, surrounded by warships, carrying a crew that had accidentally stumbled into something far bigger than themselves. The holding chamber was vast enough to swallow a city block. Translucent walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The crew of the wandering star huddled together in the center, surrounded by a barrier of shimmering energy that shocked anyone who touched it. They had been here for 6 hours according to ship time, though the alien structure seemed to exist outside normal temporal flow. Minutes felt like hours, and hours compressed into heartbeats. Captain Harlow paced the perimeter of their prison, studying every detail. Old habits from his military days before becoming a freight hauler. Know your environment. Find the weaknesses. Plan the escape. Except there were no weaknesses here. The technology was so far beyond human understanding that it might as well have been magic. Engineer Ortega sat cross-legged on the floor, jury-rigging a scanner from parts he'd salvaged from a damaged maintenance drone. His fingers worked with practiced precision despite the trembling in his hands. "Captain, I'm getting readings that don't make sense," Ortega said quietly. "The energy signature of this barrier cycles every 47 seconds. 4.3 seconds, there's a fluctuation. Not enough to bring it down, but enough that our communications might punch through." Harlow knelt beside him. "Can you send a message?" Ortega's laugh was bitter. "To who? We're 4,000 light-years from home in a part of space that shouldn't exist. Even if I could send something, it would take millennia to reach Earth." Beth Park joined them, her navigator's mind always calculating angles and trajectories. "What if we're not trying to reach Earth? What if we're trying to reach whoever else is trapped in this empire?" The idea hung between them like a fragile hope. If the Dominion was as vast and old as the aliens claimed, there must be other species caught in its web. Other prisoners. Other rebels. Before they could discuss further, the chamber walls suddenly became transparent. The crew gasped collectively. Outside, stretching to infinity in all directions, was the true scope of the Dominion. Thousands of alien species moved through the structure. Some walked on legs, others floated, a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline shells. Markets sprawled across platforms where beings traded in goods and services beyond human comprehension. Gardens grew plants with geometric perfection that defied natural growth patterns. But it wasn't the grandeur that struck Harlow. It was the eyes. Every alien they could see had the same look. Resignation. Acceptance. Fear. These weren't citizens of an empire. They were subjects of a machine that had forgotten how to be anything but oppressive. Medical Officer Torres moved to stand beside him. "They're all prisoners," she whispered. "Some just have prettier cages." The observation was interrupted by the arrival of their judge. It didn't walk into the chamber. It materialized from the floor itself, as if the structure was giving birth to it. The High Arbiter stood 4 meters tall, its body a constantly shifting mass of metallic filaments that formed and reformed in patterns that suggested a vaguely humanoid shape. Its voice came from everywhere at once, reverberating through bone and thought. Species designation unknown. Vessel class, primitive. Technology level, negligible. Cultural assessment, barbaric. You stand accused of 17 violations of Dominion law. How do you plead? Harlow stepped forward, acutely aware that he was speaking not just for his crew but possibly for all of humanity. "We plead not guilty. We didn't know your laws existed. You can't punish someone for breaking rules they never knew about." The Arbiter's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "Ignorance of law is no excuse. This principle is universal across all civilized space. The Dominion has maintained order for 18,000 cycles precisely because we do not make exceptions." "Then your order is built on injustice," Harlow said. The chamber fell silent. Even the crew behind him went still. No one spoke to the Arbiter this way. The metallic filaments compressed tightly, forming a more solid, threatening shape. "Explain this accusation, human." Harlow felt his heart hammering but kept his voice level. "You rule through fear and overwhelming force. You punish first contact as if it were an act of war. That's not civilization. That's tyranny with better technology." The Arbiter moved closer, and the temperature in the chamber dropped noticeably. "You dare judge the Dominion? Your species has existed for what, 300,000 of your years? We have maintained peace across 600,000 star systems for far longer. What do you know of the burden of order?" Harlow met the entity's eyeless gaze. "I know that peace bought with fear isn't peace. It's just slow-motion war. I know that if you have to threaten to kill every stranger who crosses your border, maybe your borders are the problem." Ortega grabbed his arm. "Captain, please." But Harlow shook him off gently. Something had shifted in the Arbiter. The metallic form was no longer compressed with rage. It was expanded, almost relaxed. Curious. Continue, it said. Harlow took a breath. On Earth, we have a saying. The measure of a civilization isn't how it treats the powerful. It's how it treats the powerless. Right now, we're powerless. You could kill us with a thought. But if you do, you prove that all this magnificence, all this technology, all these thousands of years of existence, haven't made you civilized. They've just made you efficient at oppression. The silence stretched. Park was recording everything on her neural implant, knowing that if they died, this record might somehow survive. Torres had tears streaming down her face. Young Robert Chen, recovered from his paralysis, stood straight despite his fear. The entire crew knew they were witnessing either their captain's finest moment or his last words. The Arbiter began to change again. Its form became more solid, more defined. It shaped itself into something almost human. A gesture, perhaps. An acknowledgement. In 18,000 cycles, no species has ever spoken to the Arbiter as you have. Most beg. Some threaten. All eventually submit. You have done neither. The entity paused. This interests me. Harlow sensed an opening. Then let me propose something. You say we violated your laws. Fine. Teach us those laws. Let us prove we can follow them. Let us prove that humanity deserves a chance to join the galactic community on equal terms, not as conquered subjects. The Arbiter's laughter was like wind chimes made of knives. Equal terms? You have 43 individuals on a primitive vessel. The Dominion contains 600,000 star systems and trillions of beings. What equality could possibly exist between us? Harlow smiled, and it was genuine. The same equality that exists between a parent and a newborn child. Different in size and knowledge, but equal in the right to exist, to grow, to become something more. The metaphor landed. Harlow could see it in the way the Arbiter's form stabilized. In the way the oppressive weight in the chamber lessened slightly. Somewhere in that ancient, vast intelligence, something recognized truth. You would gamble your species' first impression on a philosophical debate? The Arbiter asked. I'm gambling that beneath all this power and technology, you remember what it was like to be small, Harlow replied. The Arbiter was silent for exactly 17 seconds. Then it spoke, and its voice carried a weight that made the chamber walls vibrate. The Dominion will grant humanity a trial period. You and your crew will remain here as ambassadors and students. You will learn our laws, our customs, our expectations. If after one cycle you prove capable of coexisting within Dominion space, your species will be contacted formally. If you fail, your vessel will be returned to your space, and humanity will be marked as quarantined. No second chances will be given. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't even safety. But it was something humans knew how to work with. It was hope. Harlow looked back at his crew. 43 faces looked back, and he saw determination replacing fear. They were freight haulers, botanists, engineers, doctors. Ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. But they were human, and humans had been defying the odds since they climbed down from the trees. We accept, Harlow said. The Arbiter dissolved back into the floor, and the energy barrier around them dropped. The chamber walls became transparent again, revealing the vast city structure of the Dominion. Somewhere in that impossible architecture, humanity had just earned its first foothold among the stars. Not through conquest or superior technology, but through something simpler and more powerful. The refusal to surrender who they were, even when surrender seemed like the only option. The learning chambers were nothing like schools on Earth. Information didn't come from books or lectures. It came directly through neural interfaces that felt like ice water poured into your thoughts. The Dominion's history, laws, and customs flooded into human minds faster than comprehension could follow. Some crew members adapted quickly. Others suffered debilitating headaches for days. But none of them quit. Captain Harlow stood in what the aliens called an observation garden, watching strange flowers that grew in mathematical spirals. Beside him stood an elderly alien named Threvik, one of the few Dominion citizens who volunteered to help the humans adapt. Threvik belonged to a species that looked like walking trees with bark that shimmered in shades of copper and gold. He spoke slowly, his voice like wind through leaves. "You confuse the other species," Threvik said without preamble. "They watch you and cannot understand what they see." Harlow smiled slightly. "What do they see?" The old alien gestured with a branch-like arm toward the garden below where Beth Park was teaching a group of young aliens about Earth navigation techniques using nothing but stars and mathematics. "They see weakness that refuses to break. They see ignorance that asks questions instead of accepting answers. They see individuals who act like a tribe and a tribe that protects individuals. It disturbs the order they know." Harlow watched Park laugh at something one of the alien youngsters said. The sound was pure and human in this place of sterile perfection. Maybe that's exactly what this place needs. A little disturbance. Threvik made a sound like branches rubbing together, his version of laughter. "Careful, Captain. The Dominion does not appreciate disturbance. It has spent thousands of cycles eliminating such things. But disturbance was already spreading like wildfire through dry grass." Engineer Ortega had started sharing human music with other species. The concept of rhythm and melody for pure enjoyment rather than ceremonial function was revolutionary to beings who had forgotten how to create art without purpose. Medical Officer Torres discovered that human emotional responses to trauma were wildly different from most species, and her unorthodox therapy sessions began drawing patients from across the structure. Young Robert Chen, the botanist who had been paralyzed on that first terrifying day, found his calling teaching others about Earth plants. He brought seeds from the Wandering Star's hydroponics bay and started a garden using soil chemistry that defied Dominion standards. His plants grew wild and imperfect, nothing like the geometric precision of alien agriculture. Yet they grew with a vitality that drew crowds. Beings who had never seen truly natural growth stood mesmerized by the chaotic beauty of it. The Dominion watched all of this with increasing unease. The High Arbiter summoned Harlow multiple times, demanding explanations for why humans refused to simply learn and obey. Why did they insist on sharing their primitive ways with advanced species? Why did they question established systems that had maintained order for millennia? Each time, Harlow gave the same answer. Because order without growth is just stagnation wearing a crown. The words resonated in ways neither Harlow nor the Arbiter fully understood at first. Slowly, quietly, other species began to remember things they had forgotten. A merchant from a species called the Vorthane started painting again after seeing human artwork. A warrior caste that had known only duty began asking questions about purpose. A hive mind that had operated in perfect unity for 10,000 years started allowing individual thoughts to surface without immediately suppressing them. It was Torres who first noticed the pattern. She came to Harlow late one night cycle while he was reviewing diplomatic protocols. Her eyes were bright with exhaustion and excitement. "Captain, I've been analyzing the neural scan data from our learning sessions. Something incredible is happening." She pulled up holographic displays showing brainwave patterns. Every species in the Dominion shows similar neural structures in certain regions. Suppressed creativity centers, minimized emotional response systems, enhanced obedience pathways. They've been shaped over generations to fit the system. Harlow felt cold understanding settling into his bones. They're not maintaining order. They're engineering compliance. Torres nodded. And we're the first species they've encountered in thousands of years that hasn't been processed yet. Our brains are completely different. We're showing them what they used to be before the Dominion optimized them into obedience. The revelation changed everything. The humans weren't just learning to survive in the Dominion. They were accidentally becoming a mirror showing other species what they had lost. The question was whether the Dominion would tolerate that mirror or shatter it. The answer came during the cycle's end ceremony, a formal gathering where the Arbiter would judge humanity's progress. The chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all come to witness the verdict on these strange newcomers. Harlow stood before the Arbiter with his crew behind him, knowing that every word mattered now. The Arbiter's form was solid and defined, more present than Harlow had ever seen it. "Humans of Earth," it began, its voice carrying across the vast space. "You have completed your trial cycle. You have learned our laws and proven capable of following them. By all metrics, you have succeeded." Relief swept through the human crew, but Harlow heard something in the Arbiter's tone that made him wait. "However," the entity continued, "your presence has created unforeseen complications. Other species have begun exhibiting behavioral anomalies. Efficiency has decreased by 0.03% across 17 sectors. Order has been compromised." The chamber fell silent. 0.03% might sound tiny, but across the vastness of the Dominion it represented trillions of small rebellions. Trillions of beings remembering how to dream. "The Dominion Council has debated your fate extensively," the Arbiter said. "Some argue you should be eliminated as a destabilizing influence. Others suggest you should be processed like all species, optimized for integration." Harlow felt his crew tense behind him. This was the moment. Life or death, freedom or slavery, decided by an intelligence so vast and old it had forgotten what it meant to be vulnerable. But then Threvik stepped forward from the crowd. The old alien's copper bark seemed to glow as he spoke. "I wish to testify." The Arbiter turned its attention to him. "Speak, Threvik of the Korthal." The ancient alien's voice carried the weight of centuries. "I am 9,000 cycles old. I have served the Dominion faithfully since my species was integrated. I have never questioned the order. Never sought beyond what was permitted. Never dreamed of anything other than duty." He paused, and his next words fell like stones into still water. "Until I met the humans." Other beings in the chamber stirred. The Arbiter's form rippled with something that might have been concern. Threvik continued. "These humans taught my granddaughter about something they call curiosity. She asked me yesterday why the stars are beautiful. Not how they form or what purpose they serve, but why they move something in our spirits when we look at them. I had no answer because I had forgotten the question existed. The Dominion gave me peace, stability, purpose. But the humans reminded me that there was once joy." More beings stepped forward. A Vorthane merchant. A warrior from a species Harlow didn't recognize. A representative of the hive mind. One by one they spoke, and their message was the same. The humans had awakened something the Dominion had spent millennia putting to sleep. Not rebellion, not chaos, but simply the memory of what it meant to be alive rather than merely functional. The Arbiter stood motionless for a long time. When it finally spoke, its voice was different. Softer. Almost uncertain. The Dominion was created to prevent war. To end suffering. To bring order to a galaxy that had torn itself apart for millions of cycles. We succeeded. We brought peace. It paused. But perhaps we forgot that peace is supposed to be the foundation for something greater, not the ceiling that prevents growth. Harlow took a careful step forward. "Then let us help you remember. Not by tearing down what you've built, but by adding what's been missing. You have the order. We have the chaos. Together, maybe we can find balance." The Arbiter's form began to change. Not dissolving or becoming threatening, but transforming into something new. Multiple forms within one, representing the diversity it had spent so long suppressing. When it spoke again, its voice carried harmonics that suggested internal debate, multiple perspectives existing simultaneously. The Dominion will enter a new phase. Humanity will be granted provisional membership, not as subjects but as partners. You will help us remember what we have forgotten. In exchange, we will teach you what we have learned. This process will take generations. It will be difficult. There will be resistance and setbacks. The entity's multiple forms aligned into a single, clear image. But perhaps that is exactly what both our peoples need. The courage to grow instead of simply endure. The chamber erupted in sounds that translated as everything from approval to outrage. But beneath it all, Harlow heard something else. Hope. The kind of fragile, precious hope that comes when people realize change is possible. He looked back at his crew. Torres was crying openly. Ortega was grinning like a fool. Park had her arm around young Chen, who looked stunned. 43 ordinary humans who had refused to be ordinary when it mattered most. They had come seeking a new home among the stars. Instead, they had sparked something that might reshape the galaxy itself. Not through weapons or conquest, but through the simple, stubborn insistence that there had to be more to existence than mere survival. That dreams mattered as much as order. That the chaos of growth was worth the risk of failure. As the gathering dispersed and the humans prepared for the long journey of integration, Harlow stood alone for a moment in the observation garden. The geometric flowers still grew in their perfect spirals. But nearby, Chen's wild earth plants sprawled in beautiful disorder. Both were real. Both had value. And maybe, just maybe, both could learn to grow together. The stars beyond the structure looked different now. Not wrong, as they had that first terrifying day. Just new. Full of possibility. Full of hope. And somewhere out there, Earth waited. Eventually, humanity would return home with the greatest gift any explorer could bring. Proof that even in the vastness of space, even facing powers beyond imagination, the human spirit could not be broken. It could only shine brighter.